The dust-laden wind carried the scent of change as Catherine O'Sullivan stared defiantly at the man who had just declared she couldn't purchase the abandoned homestead on the outskirts of Redemption Creek, Colorado. The year was 1876, and at 22 years of age, Catherine had already endured more judgment than most women twice her age. "It ain't proper for a woman to own property without a husband," the balding banker insisted, his jowls quivering with indignation. "What would folks say? A single woman living alone, it's downright sinful, Miss O'Sullivan." Catherine's emerald eyes flashed with determination. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical braid, revealing high cheekbones flushed with anger. "Mr. Jameson, I have the money right here." "There is no law saying a woman cannot purchase property." The banker's face reddened as he noticed several customers watching their exchange. "There are God's laws, miss, which decent folk abide by. What you're wanting is freedom no respectable woman should desire." "Then perhaps I don't wish to be respectable by your measure," Catherine replied, her Irish accent thickening with emotion as she gathered her reticule. "Keep your property and your opinions. I'll find another way." As she pushed through the bank's doors onto the dusty Main Street, Catherine fought back tears of frustration. 3 years of working as a schoolteacher, saving every penny, and this was her reward. More doors slammed in her face. Her parents had died on the journey west when she was 17, leaving her alone in this frontier town where a woman's worth was measured by her husband's standing. "Excuse me, madam, couldn't help but overhear your predicament." Catherine turned to find herself looking up at a tall man leaning against a hitching post. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see the stubble of a beard on a strong jawline. His clothes were trail-worn but clean denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest that had seen better days. "I don't see how my predicament concerns you, sir," Catherine responded, attempting to step around him. The stranger straightened to his full height, revealing piercing blue eyes that crinkled slightly at the corners. "Lucas Lambert," he said, tipping his hat, "and I happen to own a parcel of land I'm looking to sell. No banker required." Catherine regarded him suspiciously. Men didn't offer help without expecting something in return. "And why would you sell to me when Mr. Jameson just made it clear that a woman buying property is practically a sin in these parts?" Lucas smiled, revealing a flash of white teeth against his sun-bronzed skin. "Way I see it, miss." "O'Sullivan, Catherine O'Sullivan. Miss O'Sullivan," he continued, "folks around here have mighty narrow views on what's sinful. Wanting your own place, your own life, that's just being human." His voice lowered to a rumble that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "If they call you sinful for wanting freedom, then I say sin beside me. This land's too big for small-minded thinking." Catherine studied him carefully. He appeared to be in his late 20s, with the lean, hardened look of a man who'd spent years in the saddle. A cowboy, most likely, though something about his demeanor suggested he might be more than that. "What kind of property?" she asked finally. 20 acres with a small cabin and creek access. Previous owner was a friend who died last winter, left it to me, but I'm not one for settling." He glanced down the street where several townspeople were watching them with obvious disapproval. "If you're interested, I could show you tomorrow morning." Common sense told Catherine to decline. She didn't know this man, but something in his straightforward manner made her reconsider. After years of struggling alone, perhaps this was the opportunity she'd been waiting for. "I'll meet you here at 8, she decided. "But Mr. Lambert, I want to be clear, I'm not looking for anything beyond a business arrangement." Lucas nodded, his expression serious. "Understood, Miss O'Sullivan. Business only." As she turned to leave, he added, "And Catherine, bring a horse if you can, it's a fair ride." When Catherine arrived the next morning, Lucas was already waiting with 2 saddled horses. The early light cast long shadows across the street, and the town was just beginning to stir. "Borrowed these from the livery," he explained, helping her mount a gentle-looking chestnut mare. "Hope you can ride. I grew up on a farm in Ireland, Mr. Lambert." "I can ride," Catherine replied, gathering the reins confidently. They rode out of town in silence, the buildings gradually giving way to open country. Catherine felt the weight of town life falling away with each hoofbeat. Out here with the vast sky above and the mountains in the distance, she could almost believe that freedom was possible. "What brought you to Redemption Creek?" Lucas asked, breaking their comfortable silence. Catherine considered how much to share. "My parents and I came west for a new beginning. They died of fever before we reached Colorado. I had teaching credentials, so I took a position at the school." Lucas's expression softened. "I'm sorry about your parents." "Thank you," she replied, then added, "What about you?" "You don't strike me as someone who's spent much time in Redemption Creek." "I go where the work is," he answered. "Drove cattle up from Texas, done some prospecting, worked as a ranch hand, lately been breaking horses for the Thompsons spread north of here." "A man of many talents," Catherine observed. Lucas smiled. "Jack of all trades, master of none, as my pa used to say." They crested a small rise, and Lucas reined his horse to a stop. Below them lay a narrow valley sheltered by cottonwood trees. A small cabin stood near a creek that wound its way through the property like a silver ribbon. Beyond the cabin were open meadows dotted with wildflowers. "It's beautiful," Catherine breathed. "It needs work," Lucas cautioned as they rode closer. "Roof leaks in one corner, gardens overgrown. But the structure's sound and the water's good year-round." The cabin was indeed rough, a simple one-room structure with a stone fireplace, wooden table, 2 chairs, and a narrow bed, but Catherine could see its potential immediately. The windows faced east, catching the morning light. The creek provided fresh water, and most importantly, it was far enough from town to escape the constant judgment but close enough to ride in for supplies. "How much?" she asked, trying to keep the eagerness from her voice. Lucas named a sum that was significantly less than what she'd been prepared to pay for the property in town. Catherine narrowed her eyes. "That's well below market value, Mr. Lambert." "Why?" Lucas leaned against the doorframe, studying her with those penetrating blue eyes. "Like I said, it was my friend's place. Rather see it go to someone who'll care for it than sit empty. Besides," he added with a hint of a smile, "I enjoy irritating folks like Jameson." Catherine walked outside, needing to think. The offer seemed too good to be true, yet she sensed no deception in Lucas. She'd learned to read people during her years alone. "I'll need somewhere to stable my horse and perhaps keep a cow," she mused, more to herself than to him. Lucas pointed to a dilapidated structure behind the cabin. "That lean-to could be fixed up as a small barn, good grazing in the meadow." Catherine made her decision. "I'll take it. When can we draw up the papers?" "Got a friend in town who's a notary. We can ride back today, get it done proper." By sunset, the property was legally hers. Catherine had arranged to continue teaching until the end of the term, 2 weeks away, after which she would move to her new home. As they parted ways outside the notary's office, Lucas touched the brim of his hat. "I'll be around the Thompson place if you need any help getting settled." "Thank you, Mr. Lambert, but I can manage," Catherine insisted. "Never doubted it," he replied with that easy smile that inexplicably quickened her pulse. "But even the most capable folks need a hand sometimes." Over the next 2 weeks, Catherine divided her time between teaching and preparing for her move. She purchased basic supplies, seeds for planting, and a young milk cow from a farmer outside town. Word of her property purchase spread quickly, bringing with it the expected disapproval. "Living alone out there, it's not safe, let alone proper," Mrs. Whitaker, the minister's wife, cautioned after Sunday service. "A young woman needs protection," added Mrs. Peterson, eyeing Catherine with thinly veiled suspicion. "Unless, of course, you're expecting company." Catherine understood the insinuation and lifted her chin. "I appreciate your concern, ladies, but I am quite capable of taking care of myself." The whispers followed her through town, unnatural, headstrong, sinful, but Catherine found herself caring less with each passing day. For the first time since her parents' death, she had a purpose beyond mere survival. On her final day of teaching, Catherine dismissed her students with emotional goodbyes. She had arranged for her few belongings to be transported to the cabin the following morning. As she closed up the schoolhouse, she was surprised to find Lucas waiting outside. "Mr. Lambert, I didn't expect to see you." He shifted, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Thought you might need help moving tomorrow. I've hired Mr. Wilson's wagon, Catherine explained. Wilson's got a bad back. He'll unload your things, but he won't help set anything up. Lucas cleared his throat. I've got the day free. Figured an extra pair of hands might be useful. Catherine wanted to refuse to prove she needed no one's assistance, but practicality won out. Very well. Thank you. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Catherine supervised the loading of her modest possessions, clothes, books, a cherished clock that had belonged to her mother, cooking utensils, and the supplies she'd purchased. Lucas arrived as promised, riding alongside the wagon as they made their way out of town. At the cabin, Wilson unloaded her belongings with minimal care before departing, clearly uncomfortable with the arrangement. Left alone with Lucas, Catherine felt a moment of awkwardness. "Where would you like to start?" he asked, rolling up his sleeves. They spent the day working side by side. Lucas repaired the leaking roof while Catherine cleaned the cabin from top to bottom. Together they fixed the lean-to, creating a suitable shelter for her cow and his horse when he visited. By late afternoon, the cabin had been transformed into a home. "It's coming along nicely," Lucas observed as they sat on the porch steps, taking a brief rest. "You've got a good eye for making a place comfortable." Catherine accepted the canteen he offered, taking a long drink before responding. "My mother always said a home is what you make of it, not what it's made of." "Wise woman," Lucas commented. "Mine said much the same." "Where is your family?" Catherine asked, realizing she knew almost nothing about him. "Gone," he replied simply. "Pa died in the war fought for the Union. Ma followed a few years later, just me and the open road since then." "I'm sorry," Catherine said softly. Lucas shrugged, but his eyes betrayed deeper emotion. "Life happens as it will, we just keep moving." He stood abruptly, changing the subject. "Best get that garden turned over before dark if you want to plant soon." They worked until sunset, when Lucas finally declared it was time for him to leave. Catherine walked him to his horse, suddenly reluctant to see him go. "Thank you for your help today," she said, truly grateful. "My pleasure." He mounted his horse with easy grace. "I'll check back in a few days, make sure everything's holding together." As she watched him ride away, Catherine was struck by an unfamiliar feeling, not the loneliness she'd grown accustomed to, but something closer to anticipation. The first weeks on her own were both exhilarating and challenging. Catherine established a routine, rising at dawn, tending to the cow, working in her garden, and spending afternoons reading or making improvements to the cabin. She rode into town once a week for supplies, enduring the stares and whispers with growing indifference. True to his word, Lucas stopped by every few days. Sometimes he brought small gift seeds for her garden, a repaired tool. Once a puppy he claimed needed a home. "He'll bark if anyone approaches," Lucas explained as the floppy-eared mutt licked Catherine's hand enthusiastically. "Good company, too." Catherine named the dog Finn and was surprised at how quickly he became her constant companion. She found herself looking forward to Lucas's visits, during which they would often work together on projects around the property. During one such visit in early summer, they sat together after dinner on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Why haven't you settled somewhere?" Catherine asked. "You seem to know how to build a good life." Lucas considered her question. "Never found a place worth staying," he answered finally, "or maybe a reason." Their eyes met briefly before Catherine looked away, unaccountably flustered. "More coffee," she offered, rising quickly. When she returned, Lucas had moved to lean against the porch railing, his profile silhouetted against the darkening sky. "You know, people in town are still talking about you," Catherine sighed. "Let them talk, I'm happy here. Are you?" He asked, turning to face her. "Truly, yes," she answered without hesitation. "For the first time since my parents died, I feel whole." Lucas smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face. "Good, you deserve that." As summer progressed, Catherine's garden flourished, and she began preserving vegetables for the coming winter. Lucas's visits became more frequent, and with each one, the ease between them deepened. He taught her to shoot the rifle he insisted she keep for protection. She taught him to make her mother's soda bread, laughing at his flour-covered attempts. They were different in many ways. She, educated and methodical. He, intuitive and spontaneous, yet they shared a core understanding of what mattered in life. Honesty, hard work, and the freedom to choose one's own path. One afternoon in late August, Catherine was picking beans when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Expecting Lucas, she looked up with a smile that quickly faded when she saw it was Reverend Whitaker and his wife, along with Mr. Jameson from the bank. "Miss O'Sullivan," the Reverend called, dismounting stiffly, "we've come to speak with you about a matter of some concern." Catherine wiped her hands on her apron, straightening her shoulders. "Good afternoon. What brings you all this way, Mrs.?" Whitaker surveyed the property with obvious disapproval. "It's about your situation and your frequent visitor." "My situation is perfectly fine, as you can see," Catherine replied coolly, "and my visitors are my business alone." The Reverend cleared his throat. "There has been talk in town, Miss O'Sullivan, improper talk. A young woman living alone is already cause for concern, but when that woman regularly entertains a man unchaperoned—" "Mr. Lambert has been helping with repairs," Catherine interrupted, anger rising in her chest. "Nothing more." Jameson snorted. "That drifter's been seen coming and going at all hours. It's indecent." "What's indecent is riding out here to harass me on my own property," Catherine retorted. "I've broken no laws." "There are God's laws to consider," the Reverend insisted. "Your immortal soul is also my own concern," Catherine cut in. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to finish." Mrs. Whitaker's face pinched with righteous indignation. "We're trying to help you, Catherine, before your reputation is beyond salvation." "My reputation?" Catherine laughed without humor. "The town decided I was sinful the moment I chose to live on my own terms. If independence makes me sinful in their eyes, so be it." "This isn't just about independence," Jameson pressed. "It's about morality. A woman alone with a man like Lambert." "A man like me what, exactly?" Lucas's voice came from behind them. He rode up slowly, his expression neutral but his eyes hard as he dismounted. The Reverend shifted uncomfortably. "We were just expressing concern for Miss O'Sullivan's reputation." "Sounded more like you were judging her," Lucas observed, moving to stand beside Catherine. "On her own land, no less," Jameson puffed up. "This doesn't concern you, Lambert." "When 3 people ride out to intimidate a woman who's done nothing wrong, it concerns any decent person," Lucas replied evenly. Catherine felt a surge of gratitude for his presence, but was determined to fight her own battle. "I appreciate your concern," she told the unwelcome visitors with forced politeness, "but my decisions are my own. Now I'd like you to leave." After a tense moment, the Reverend nodded curtly. "We'll pray for you, Miss O'Sullivan." "Thank you." "I'll do the same for you," she answered, watching as they reluctantly mounted their horses and rode away. When they were out of sight, Catherine's composed facade crumbled. She sank onto the porch steps, shaking with anger and hurt. "You all right?" Lucas asked gently, sitting beside her. "Why can't they just leave me be?" she demanded, fighting tears. "What gives them the right to judge how I live?" Lucas sighed. "Fear, mostly. People fear what they don't understand. A woman making her own way challenges everything they believe about how things should be. And you?" Catherine looked at him directly. "Why don't you judge me?" "Because I've been judged enough myself," he answered simply. "Drifter, troublemaker, no account hurt at all, but a person's worth isn't in what others think of them." Catherine studied him, seeing beyond the rugged exterior to the thoughtful man beneath. "Thank you for standing with me." "Always will," he promised quietly, then cleared his throat. "Now want help with those beans, or did you plan to let them rot while you argued with the good people of Redemption Creek?" His teasing brought a reluctant smile to her face. "I suppose they could use picking." That evening, as they sat by the fireplace after a simple meal, Lucas seemed preoccupied. Finally, he spoke. "Maybe I shouldn't come around so much. Those folks aren't entirely wrong. It is giving people reason to talk." Catherine felt a surprising pang at his words. "I don't care what people say." "You should," he insisted. "You have to live in this community." "I live here," she countered, gesturing to the cabin. "This is my community now." Lucas ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of frustration. Catherine, you can't just cut yourself off from everyone. I'm not, she argued. I'm choosing who to include in my life, and I choose, she stopped abruptly, realizing what she'd been about to say. Lucas looked at her intently. You choose what? My freedom, she finished, avoiding his gaze. I choose my freedom above their approval. The crackling fire filled the silence between them. When Lucas spoke again, his voice was low. Freedom's a fine thing, but it can be lonely. I'm used to being alone, Catherine said softly. Lucas reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers. You don't have to be. The touch of his hand sent warmth spreading through her, and Catherine found herself unable to pull away. This attraction had been building gradually through shared work and conversation, growing stronger with each visit. She denied it, even to herself, afraid of what it might mean for her hard-won independence. Lucas, she began hesitantly. I can't. A sudden bark from Finn interrupted them, followed by the sound of approaching riders. Lucas was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. Stay here, he instructed, reaching for his gun belt. This is my home, Catherine objected, grabbing the rifle. Outside, 3 men on horseback approached, their faces obscured by bandanas. Catherine's heart raced as she recognized the threat immediately. Evening, folks, called the lead rider, his voice slurred with alcohol. Heard there was a woman living out here alone, came to see for ourselves. Lucas stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Catherine. She's not alone, best move on, the second rider laughed. That's the drifter, boys, Lambert, ain't it? Hear you been spending a lot of time out here. His tone made the implication clear. My business is my own, Lucas replied evenly. Now state your purpose or leave. The lead rider dismounted, swaggering forward. Maybe we just wanted to introduce ourselves to the lady, been hearing she's real friendly. Catherine raised her rifle. I'm not feeling particularly friendly tonight. Please leave my property. The third rider, who had remained silent, suddenly drew his gun. Put that down, woman, we're just having some fun. Lucas's hand moved faster than Catherine could follow. In an instant, his revolver was aimed steadily at the mounted man. That wasn't smart, he said calmly. Now all of you back up and ride out. This doesn't need to get ugly. The lead rider hesitated, looking from Lucas to Catherine and back again. 2 against 3, I like those odds. Do you also like the odds of surviving a gut shot? Lucas asked, his voice dangerously quiet, because that's what you'll get if you don't turn around now. A tense silence followed. Catherine kept her rifle trained on the men, grateful for Lucas's lessons. Finally, the leader spat on the ground. Ain't worth the trouble, he muttered. Come on, boys, plenty of other entertainment in town. They backed away slowly, mounting their horses. As they turned to leave, the second rider called back, Enjoy your sinful woman, cowboy. Town's right about both of you. Only when the sound of hoofbeats faded did Catherine lower her rifle, her hands trembling with delayed fear and anger. Who were they? Trouble, Lucas answered grimly, holstering his weapon. Probably work at one of the ranches, heard talk in town and decided to investigate. He turned to her, his expression concerned. Catherine, this is serious, they might come back. I can handle myself, she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. Lucas ran a hand through his hair again. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to. He paced the small cabin, clearly agitated. I should stay, at least tonight. The thought of him sleeping in her cabin sent a wave of conflicting emotions through Catherine. That would only confirm what everyone's saying about us. I'll sleep on the porch, he clarified, just to make sure they don't return. Catherine nodded reluctantly. Thank you. Later that night, unable to sleep, Catherine stepped outside to check on Lucas. He sat on the porch steps, alert despite the late hour, Finn curled at his feet. You should be sleeping, he said without turning around. So should you, she countered, sitting beside him. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the dark sky. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the chirping of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. What they said, Catherine ventured finally. About me being sinful, it's what everyone thinks, isn't it? Lucas sighed. Some do, not everyone, and you, she pressed. What do you think? He turned to look at her, his face half illuminated by moonlight. I think you're the bravest, most principled person I've ever met. I think you deserve every freedom you're fighting for. His words warmed her more than any fire could. Why do you keep coming back here, Lucas? The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken meaning. Lucas seemed to consider his answer carefully. At first I told myself I was just being neighborly, he admitted. Then I said it was because you might need help with the property, he smiled faintly. Eventually I ran out of excuses and had to admit the truth. Which is, Catherine's heart hammered in her chest. That being around you feels like finding something I didn't know I was looking for. His voice lowered. I've traveled all over this country, Catherine, never wanted to stay anywhere until now. The honesty in his words touched something deep within her. For years, Catherine had protected herself by keeping people at arm's length, convinced that independence meant standing alone. But perhaps true freedom wasn't the absence of connection, but the ability to choose it on one's own terms. I've been afraid, she confessed. Afraid that caring for someone would mean losing myself again. After my parents died, I had to rebuild everything who I was, what I wanted. I couldn't bear to disappear into someone else's life. Lucas reached for her hand, his touch gentle. I would never ask you to be less than who you are, Catherine. That fire in you, that independence, it's what I admire most. She looked at their joined hands, calloused from honest work, and felt a certainty she hadn't expected. They'll talk even more if we... She let the implication hang in the air. Let them, Lucas said simply. If they call you sinful for wanting freedom, then sin beside me. We'll make our own rules. Catherine smiled, years of caution giving way to something brighter. I'd like that. Under the vast Colorado sky, with the scent of pine and sage on the breeze, Catherine leaned forward and kissed him. It was a declaration of independence unlike any other, choosing love on her own terms. The days that followed brought changes both subtle and profound. Lucas continued to sleep on the porch or in the lean-to, a concession to propriety that made Catherine smile even as she respected his restraint. During daylight hours, they worked side by side, preparing the property for winter. In the evenings, they talked for hours, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for the future. One evening, as autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds, Lucas broached a subject they'd been circling for weeks. I've been thinking, he began, unusually hesitant. About us, about the future. Catherine looked up from her mending, heart quickening. Oh, this arrangement, me coming and going, sleeping outside, it isn't sustainable, he continued, especially with winter coming. What do you suggest? She asked carefully. Lucas met her gaze directly. Marriage. The word hung in the air between them. Catherine set aside her sewing, trying to sort through the rush of emotions his proposal evoked. Before you answer, Lucas added quickly, I want to be clear about something. I'm not asking to own you or change you. Your freedom matters to me as much as it does to you. Marriage has always meant a woman giving up her independence, Catherine said slowly. Her property, her choices, everything becomes her husband's by law. Lucas nodded. I know, and I know how hard you fought for what you have. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded document. That's why I had this drawn up. Catherine accepted the paper with curiosity, unfolding it to find a legal contract. As she read the carefully worded provisions, her eyes widened in surprise. This says that in the event of our marriage, all property currently in my name would remain mine exclusively, she summarized, looking up at him. And any decisions regarding said property would be mine alone. Keep reading, Lucas encouraged. It also says. Catherine's voice faltered as she continued, that you renounce any legal right to control my movements, occupation, or personal decisions. She lowered the document. Lucas, this contradicts every marriage law in the territory. It might not hold up in court, he acknowledged. But it's my promise to you, legally binding or not. I don't want your submission, Catherine. I want your partnership. Catherine stared at the contract, then at the man before her, this cowboy who understood her need for freedom better than anyone she'd ever known. This is unprecedented, she whispered. Lucas smiled. So are you. Catherine rose from her chair, moving to stand before him. And if I wanted children someday, they'd be raised to respect their mother's independence as much as I do, he answered without hesitation. And if people continue to talk, they will, Lucas acknowledged, "and will continue not to care." Catherine took his hands in hers. "Ask me again." Lucas's eyes never left hers as he spoke. "Catherine O'Sullivan, will you marry me?" "Not to change you or constrain you, but to build something together neither of us could create alone." "Yes," she said simply, "I will." They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony performed by a justice of the peace in the next town over. The Reverend in Redemption Creek had refused to officiate, citing their unconventional arrangement and questionable morality. Catherine wore a simple blue dress rather than traditional white, another choice that would set tongues wagging. Their only witnesses were the blacksmith and his wife, who had always treated Catherine with kindness, and a rancher who had become Lucas's friend during his time breaking horses. After the brief ceremony, they rode home together as husband and wife, to the cabin that had become a symbol of Catherine's independence and would now be the foundation of their shared life. That night, as they stood together in the cabin that now belonged to them both, Catherine felt no regret for the choice she had made. When Lucas took her in his arms, there was both tenderness and passion in his touch, a perfect reflection of the man himself. No regrets. He murmured against her hair. "None," she assured him. "Though I suspect the town will be scandalized that I've kept my name alongside yours." Lucas laughed. "Catherine O'Sullivan Lambert is a fine name, tells the world exactly who you are, your own woman first, my wife second." As the seasons turned, the small homestead flourished under their combined efforts. They added a proper barn and expanded the cabin to include a second room. Lucas took work breaking horses but always returned home, no longer the drifter he had once been. Catherine continued to grow her garden and began selling preserves and baked goods in town, slowly earning respect from some, if not all, of the townsfolk. The following spring brought news that Catherine was expecting a child. The prospect of motherhood both thrilled and terrified her. "Will I still be me?" she asked Lucas one evening as they sat on their expanded porch. "Once I'm someone's mother," Lucas considered her question with his usual thoughtfulness. "You'll be more than you were before," he answered, "but never less." Their daughter was born on a crisp autumn day, a strong, healthy child with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit. They named her Eleanor Freedom Lambert, a name that raised eyebrows but suited her perfectly. Life was not always easy. There were lean years when drought affected the crops, and harsh winters when they were snowbound for weeks. The town's opinion remained divided, some gradually accepting their unconventional marriage, others maintaining that Catherine's independence was an affront to proper society. But within the walls of their home, they had created a world of their own making, governed by mutual respect and abiding love. 5 years after Eleanor's birth, a letter arrived that would test their carefully constructed life. It was from a cattle company in Wyoming, offering Lucas a position as foreman, a substantial promotion from the occasional work he'd been doing. "It's an excellent opportunity," Catherine acknowledged as they discussed it that evening after Eleanor was asleep. "Better pay, steady work." "It would mean moving," Lucas pointed out, watching her reaction carefully. "Leaving the home you fought so hard for." Catherine looked around the cabin that had represented so much to her. Every beam and board held memories: her first night alone, the garden she'd coaxed from rocky soil, the porch where Lucas had first kissed her. This place had been her declaration of independence. "Home isn't just a place," she said finally, echoing what she'd told Lucas years before. "It's what we make of it, and we could make something new together." Lucas studied her face. "Are you certain? I know what this land means to you." Catherine smiled, realizing the truth as she spoke it. What it meant was freedom, but I've learned that freedom isn't tied to a piece of land. "It's here," she placed a hand over her heart, "and in the life we've built. We can take that anywhere." In the spring of 1883, they sold the homestead to a young couple looking for their own fresh start. Catherine felt a pang as she handed over the deed, but also a sense of rightness. The cycle was continuing. Another beginning was taking shape. Their journey to Wyoming marked the start of a new chapter. The cattle company provided a comfortable house on the ranch property, larger than their cabin had been. Lucas excelled in his role as foreman, his natural leadership and fair-mindedness earning him respect from the ranch hands. Catherine, never one to remain idle, soon established herself in their new community. She began teaching again, this time in a small schoolhouse on the ranch for the workers' children. Eleanor, now 6, thrived in the open spaces of ranch life, her fearless nature and quick mind a blend of both her parents. In their new home, Catherine and Lucas remained true to the principles that had defined their union from the beginning. Their marriage continued to challenge conventions, with Catherine maintaining her independence even as she embraced their partnership. When their son was born 2 years after their move, they named him William Justice Lambert, honoring both freedom and fairness, the cornerstones of their shared philosophy. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, the West changed around them. The wild frontier gradually yielded to settlement and civilization. Railroads connected once isolated communities, and new technologies transformed daily life. Through it all, Catherine and Lucas adapted without compromising their essential beliefs. In 1906, 30 years after they first met, Catherine sat beside Lucas on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky. At 52, her chestnut hair was streaked with silver, and fine lines marked the corners of her eyes. Lucas, now in his late 50s, moved more slowly than in his cowboy days, but his blue eyes still held the same intensity when they looked at her. "You ever regret it?" she asked, her voice soft in the evening quiet. "Giving up your wandering life for this?" Lucas took her hand, the gesture as natural as breathing after 3 decades together. "Not for a single day," he answered honestly. "My life began when you let me stay." Eleanor, now a poised young woman of 28, had married a progressive-minded lawyer and lived in Cheyenne with their 2 children. She had inherited her mother's determination and independence, becoming one of Wyoming's vocal advocates for women's suffrage. William, at 26, managed a portion of the ranch, combining his father's practical knowledge with innovative techniques learned during his time at agricultural college. "We did all right, didn't we?" Catherine mused, looking out at the land they'd helped shape, despite what everyone said. "We did better than all right," Lucas affirmed. "We lived by our own lights." As twilight deepened into night, Catherine reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had once defined freedom as standing alone, answerable to no one. Life had taught her a more nuanced truth, that the greatest freedom came not from isolation, but from being truly known and loved for exactly who you were. "They called me sinful for wanting freedom," she said, echoing words from long ago, "and you told me to sin beside you." Lucas smiled, the memory as clear to him as it was to her. "Best sin I ever committed." Catherine leaned against his shoulder, content in the knowledge that they had created something remarkable, a love that expanded rather than limited, that celebrated independence within connection. In a world that had insisted a woman must choose between freedom and love, they had proven it was possible to have both. "I love you, Lucas Lambert," she said simply. "And I love you, Catherine O'Sullivan Lambert," he responded, his voice carrying the same warmth it had when he'd first spoken those words decades before. "Always have, always will." As stars appeared in the darkening sky, they sat together in comfortable silence. Their hands intertwined, 2 people who had defied convention to write their own story. One where freedom and love were not opposing forces, but perfect companions on life's journey. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow. They celebrated the marriages of their children, welcomed grandchildren, and mourned the passing of old friends. Through it all, their bond remained unbroken, strengthened by shared experiences and deepened by mutual respect. In 1926, as they marked their golden wedding anniversary, surrounded by 3 generations of family, Lucas raised a toast to the woman who had changed his life. "To Catherine," he said, his voice still strong despite his 78 years. "Who taught me that the greatest adventure isn't found on the open road, but in a heart brave enough to love on its own terms." Catherine, her eyes bright with unshed tears, responded with her own toast. To the cowboy who said sin beside me and gave me the greatest freedom of all the freedom to be exactly who I am, loved completely for it. Their story became legend in the family, passed down through generations, as an example of love's transformative power when built on a foundation of mutual respect and unwavering support. Long after both had gone, their descendants would point to faded photographs and say with pride, they were ahead of their time. But Catherine and Lucas had never sought to be pioneers or rebels. They had simply followed their hearts, choosing love without surrender, partnership without subjugation. In doing so, they created not just a marriage, but a template for possibility, proving that even in the most conventional of times, two people could write their own rules and find extraordinary happiness in the doing of it. And in the end, that was their true legacy, the courage to define freedom not as the absence of connection, but as the presence of love that liberates rather than confines. A love that says, "Be who you are, completely and without apology, and I will cherish every part."